Welcome everybody to this virtual workshop about stakeholder influencing. It's a pleasure to have you on, Yiska and Carolina, and I hope others will be able to join a couple of minutes later. But in the interest of time, let's just get into it. I know those who can't make it today for this workshop will be able to benefit from simply watching the replay. So with your permission, I'm going to do the video recording. I'm going to start with the first point, which is really important. This is not a publicly available, really broadly promoted webinar, virtual session. This is for those people who have really supported me in my Change Matters book campaign back in March and April. And for that reason, I'm really grateful to all of you for making it possible for me to launch the book. I trust that you've already got your books, your digital books, your workbooks. You've got access to the webinars that I've promised you to do. And if it's applicable, and next month, in about a month's time, I'm going to be able to welcome you for my online course as well, Taming the Chaos of Change. Depending on which level you supported the project, you have access to all of these opportunities. So change matters. That's the title of my book, and change indeed does matter. I believe that one of the most commonly brought up topic is, how do I influence difficult people? They are such a pain in the and I agree with that. And I would say probably there is no difficult or challenging stakeholder. We just have people we don't understand. And in a course of 1 hour, I'm not going to be able to reveal all the secrets of stakeholder management, but I hope I can give you some practical tips to cope with that. What I would like to give you is a bit of a story about a case study I myself recently wrote about the stakeholder challenge. To show you how a very practical tool can be used to overcome those challenging situations. And then let's see how you can benefit from that. It's going to be interactive, so I'm expecting you to unmute yourself. I'm going to have a couple of polls. There will be a case study. I will let you work in a group or groups to talk about how you would approach it. And for me, it's important. It's not just a lecture. It's for us to make this really relevant to you. So I believe all of you already know me, but just a little introduction. As a published author, as of July, my book is on Amazon. I'm bringing in a lot of experience, over 20 years of experience from the corporate and not-for-profit sector. I have worked on many big and small transformational and change projects from 7 countries where I've had the chance so far to live, from New Zealand all the way to Costa Rica. Today I'm based in Switzerland, and my confused accent is coming from Hungary. So it is really, for me, a great opportunity to share with you what is it that I believe can help us to influence stakeholders, to bring them on board. So with that tiny introduction, let's get into it. Now, a quote that I really like is from Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, who says, "Knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do." I do hope that during this session, you actually will say, yeah, I know that already. I trust you will be able to say that. But I would like to also invite you, do you actually do it? And if not, what holds you back? What can we do to help you really demystify stakeholder influencing and make it simple? So in your work, you can actually bring more people on board. I highlighted the words fresh strategy in this objective statement because there is a reason why you are where you are in your positions, because you know already how to manage your stakeholders, how to really convince your bosses to do certain things, convince your colleagues, your customers. But I hope today will give you a little bit of an extra insight of what else you can do to get even better at it. In terms of ground rules, no rocket science over here. Participate, enjoy. That's a session for all of us, not just a lecture. Stay focused. So if you have any calls or emergencies, just put yourself on mute so the others are not disturbed. And make sure you grab a coffee or tea or water to stay hydrated and stay focused during the session. There are just a few options I'm going to use, a few platforms. I'm going to use this Zoom functionality. I'm going to use also Poll-Ev, which is an online voting mechanism that is not fully integrated into Zoom just yet. So I'm going to use that. You might need your mobile phone at that stage to give your comments, or we will just unmute ourselves. Let's see. And if needed, I might use a mural site just to see how I can integrate your comments into this session. So that is basically the rule of the game, the workshop so far. The agenda, we're going to talk about what is the essence of stakeholder engagement. We're going to talk about how we develop stakeholder influencing strategies. And that's the part where I'd like to show you a case study that I recently developed. It's about 5 characters with a bit of a conflict. And I know it has limited information, but we can still have a look at what works for you. What is it that would really allow you to overcome that challenge that is described in the case study. And then I'd like to show you a tool that I believe would help you both implement and evaluate your stakeholder engagement approach. Some of you might be familiar with the stakeholder analysis and influencing strategy. It's basically an Excel spreadsheet, not a new thing that I invented. It's widely available on the internet, but I hope that through showing you an example, you will be able to see how to use it properly and you can take it back to your workplace. So I keep talking about stakeholders, but please just unmute yourself and tell me, who are stakeholders for you? How would you define stakeholders?
For me, I would say everyone involved or with some kind of influence, or even if they have an opinion about it, they're involved, they're stakeholders, even in the smallest or minorest way.
So involved, influenced, some way or the other, in touch with it. Carolina and Susanna, anything to add?
No, I agree with what was said. I think also, I don't know how to explain it in the best way, but users, or not only people deciding, but people also having to execute the decisions. So
Absolutely.
yeah, maybe with different kind of priorities there. That's how I would put it.
I'm just looking at Susanna. I know she's dialing from a very different time zone from the US.
Hi, good morning.
If you want, you can just put into the chat. I will do my best to read it. But if you unmute yourself, tell us what is your definition of stakeholder, Susanna?
Yeah, for me, let me put it. I am
Very good morning.
in a warehouse this morning. So for me, stakeholders really are all the people around us, as an HR professional. For me, my stakeholders are my employees, whom I need to take care of and keep happy, but also my colleagues and my bosses, and then also, companies that provide us with their trust to provide them services. So really, all the different entities around us are our stakeholders. It's not just one person, and they're all different too. So you have to take care of them different ways.
Absolutely. So you've said a couple of things like colleagues, the employees, then any entities outside as well. That's why we sometimes say we have external and internal stakeholders to the organization in which we operate. We have primary and secondary stakeholders based on who we consider important or not that important, but still on our horizon. So we could even say stakeholders are people. Yes, people and authorities and entities. But what's important is going back a little bit to what Iska also mentioned, people who can influence the change we're driving and who are influenced. Carolina, you mentioned the users. Susanna, you mentioned the employees. Very often they are the ones who are the recipients of the change. Now, I wanted to take a moment for this because to me it's important that for the stakeholder influencing workshop, we actually are on the same page about what we mean by this. Now, what are the benefits of effectively influencing our stakeholders? Let's test it. I mean, it's only the 4 of us right now. We might have a few more people, but let's test how it will work. You can use your QR code and just scan with your camera app the little picture you see here, or write into the web, olef.com change matters 127. And you will be able to add your comment. Let's see how it works. I mean, it's a small group, but for the ease of it, I'm going to put the link into it. The good news is that in the future, I will use these all on 2 more occasions. It will be the same link afterwards. So it's increased successful outcome of projects and or changes, getting the best out of what you are planning and setting up. Fantastic. So getting the best out, being really effective, and making sure that the projects are successful are definitely important, because they will be able to collaborate with us to reach the objectives. Very true. Isn't it better when actually the colleagues, the constituents, the entities inside and outside actually partner with us to make this possible? I actually tried to find like some startling statistics about this one, because it's always nice to also speak a little bit of numbers when it comes to stakeholder engagement and influencing. I haven't really found very clear statistics other than the classical John Kotter saying that 70% of projects fail because people are not involved, etc., etc. What I found, however, is some statistics for CEOs of how much of their time they use for stakeholder influencing and engagement. And surprise or not, they spend over 70% of their time on simply convincing people and simply aligning, making sure that people understand the direction they are driving it to. We might not be stakeholder like CEOs just yet, but we still have the responsibility of influencing others. Those people who consider themselves change practitioners, change managers, even leaders, I would say at least about 70% of your time is about stakeholder influencing. And it doesn't have to be about writing down every single meeting in a certain meeting notes format, but to actually prepare a proposal, possibly with our teams, and then table it to others, talk one-on-one in teams, through newsletters, hearing out what people are saying. Without that, we can't really be successful with influencing. We have to create that two-way dialogue. Now, the next slide probably is not new. Iceberg is a model that for decades that I've been working has been a basic model for almost anything about communication, about leadership, and also about change. But fundamentally, a little recap about this is that we see above the waterline about 10% of our stakeholders, of their full identity, but their personality, because we see what they do, their actions, their behaviors, we hear what they say, but what's underneath, under the waterline in the iceberg, their beliefs, their values, their preferences, it's often invisible. And if we judge people based on 10% of what we see of them as resistant, we're gonna be really not successful. And that's why I'm saying that stakeholder engagement does take a lot of time, because whilst we're not gonna psychoanalyze all of our stakeholders, we need to go a little bit deeper so we understand what holds them back. A very basic curve. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but it's called the grief cycle from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was a Swiss-American psychologist who back in 1969 wrote her dissertation about the emotional phases people went through when they were diagnosed with lethal diseases. And as she finished her dissertation, she realized actually people don't have to go through such difficult changes like sickness. Even small changes will create typical grief cycles in us. In her model, depending on which version you look at, there are 517 phases that you can look at. If I just simplify it for the sake of this presentation, I would say that first, people are denying it. This cannot be, and there's a bit of a dip in motivation and productivity. This cannot be. Susanna is like, we've heard that before, but it's not going to happen to us. Like, we heard that before, leave us alone. And that's a natural reaction. Then once, let's say, Susanna, you keep communicating to them about that change, they realize it is happening, then probably they're going to try to resist it with all their forces. That's when they will come up with reasons why you should not be doing the change that you're looking for. So they went over the denial, they survived the denial, they know it's happening, but then they have all the arguments why we should not be pursuing that change. That's when we usually enter a little bit of a deep, where people are not motivated, they are very likely not productive. That's what we call a danger zone. And that's indeed dangerous, because the best people might leave, but also you have such low productivity and motivation that likely there would be failures in your business operations. But if we can manage it well, eventually when people get their concerns acknowledged, they get their whys and what's in it for me answers, they start exploring, like with a compass. They see, what does this mean to me? And they start exploring what the new reality could be, so much so that eventually they embrace it with two arms. We could talk about lots of changes that we experience on an everyday basis, maybe you as well, when you changed from one city to the other, or from one country to the other, or even simply moving from one flat or house to another one. We deny that finally we got that new apartment or house we wanted so much, then we resist that beautiful opportunity, even though we originally wanted it, because we would leave the beautiful and so familiar surroundings behind. And then once we start moving, we start exploring the new place, we explore what new things we can actually benefit from. And probably if you look back now, you're looking at it as something that you was definitely a welcome change. Sometimes it takes 10 minutes, an hour, a week, even a year to get through this curve, but it's natural, it's human to resist. That's what I wanted to show you. Now, there are lots of methodologies out there. And if I can just have a little hands up, if you have been in touch with PROSCI, Prosci, PROSCI. Carolina, could you tell us what do you know about PROSCI? Anything?
Well, you introduced the ATCAR method.
Yeah.
And actually, well, I'm doing project management, and in one of those, in one of the books I was reading, there was obviously a huge part on change management, and yes, it's exactly the ATCAR method, which was really interesting to read and to learn about.
Now, when it comes to demystifying change management, thank you so much, Carolina, for sharing. It's not just about picking up toolboxes and methodologies, but finding the one that best fits you. I'm not saying PROSCI is the best. PROSCI is an US-based global organization that benchmarks and also consults projects around the world. And every 2 years, they carry out a biannual benchmarking study, doing interviews with over 1,700 organizations to see what are the trends, what are the challenges, what are the best practices. And this organization developed this 5-step model, which I found very easy. Even if I work with change leaders who have no clue about change management, they're gonna get this. If you want to be PROSCI certified, feel free to look up the website and see where you can get your certification programs. If you want just some free resources, they do a lot of mini trainings for a couple of minutes and also hourly sessions that are worth joining if you ask me. But I'd like to just show this to you because maybe you like it, and then you can also go back to your workplace and say, okay, I'm going to talk to my boss about why the human side is so important. So ATCAR stands for A, awareness, D, desire, K, knowledge, A, ability, and R, reinforcement. And I'm going to tell you 2 stories that hopefully will highlight what this is about. In the 1990s, there was a Green Hotel Association established that said, okay, we are using way too much detergents in our hotels. Maybe you've seen this as well in your travels. And we are using too much detergents. So we're going to invite hotels to join us to be a green hotel. And that would mean that they would when the hotel guests arrive, they would have a sign, we are a green hotel, and we would like you to be part of a better, greener future. So even today, if you go into certain hotels, in the bathroom, they have a sign. Did you notice how much detergent we are using? The world is suffering. We are polluting the environment so much. Do you want to be part of the solution? So they created an awareness for the need for the change, because indeed, climate change, we are polluting the world too much. And there were facts and even emotionally intriguing reasons for people to recognize this. And then there's a question, do you want to be part of the solution so that our kids and grandkids will be able to enjoy planet Earth as we do? So there's a bit of motivation around it, because I would like to make sure that my kids also be able to see the beautiful nature the world has. Now, the knowledge here is they put also a little sign up. If you want to replace your towel, then just put your towel on the towel rack. If you want to reuse it, put it on the bathtub. This is the training part of it. There are 2 options, either up or down. And if it's up, you will use it next day. And if it's down, we're going to replace it. Now here, the ability, we don't need too much coaching and feedback on this, but there might be still a little bit of a necessity to it. When in the 2008, 2009-ish, I started traveling a lot around the world for my job, I did my social experiment and I put up my towels in the hotels where I was staying. And a big portion of the hotel towels were replaced the next day. What do you think a normal person, a hotel guest, would feel like if, despite the invitation to be part of a positive change and doing what's required, they are not following through? How do you think such people feel? Happy? Content?
I wouldn't.
Neither did I. I was frustrated. I followed all your instructions. I read it. I talked to you and I followed the instructions and you replaced it. What was found by this association that actually the reinforcement failed because the hotel maids replaced it, regardless they were on the floor or on the rack. And think about the changes in your workplace. There might be a big change project. You announce it. Rah, rah, rah. The CEO, the general manager talks about it. You even spend time on clarifying what's in it for them, creating really the desire for people to be part of it. You invite them for workshops and trainings. You might even give them a sandbox, so a testing ground. So without any major consequences, they can try and test it. And then people just keep using the old system, or we as leaders, we don't ask for updates, or we don't measure the progress of really adapting to it. Now, this is really interesting because a lot of organizations are brilliant at announcing the change and why it's happening, even rather good with talking about why it's good for the employees and at different levels. And trainings and workshops is one of the things that most people are doing without taking care of the first two steps. But then if we don't follow up, if we don't sustain the momentum, it's going to fall apart. Another personal example for personal change is in the beginning of the year. Usually many people like to say, I want to get fit this year. And I'm aware of the need for change because I got a doctor's report and some of those values are on red and the scale is way too high after the year-end holidays. Now I have a desire to get fit because I want to fit into my clothes. I want to be able to hang out with my kids without losing breath. So I know what it is. And I know that I need to watch out for exercising, for nutrition and sleep. I might even make sure that I have the ability by having a partner. So basically a buddy, either a training buddy or a personal trainer. And then I check again on my weight scale and also with my doctor how it's going. If we take care of all of those steps, there will be a sustained change of behavior. That's what we are looking for overall. So this is a methodology that I found really interesting and simple to follow. But when we talk about using this methodology, often people are asking me, so what's the borderline, the fine line between influencing and manipulating? Because they kind of close to each other. Jiska, you are nodding. Any thoughts on that? What is the difference?
Yeah, sometimes it feels difficult where the line is and where it feels like, okay, I'm trying to influence you for the better part of the project. But at some point, sometimes I feel like, okay, now aren't I manipulating you into doing something you really don't want to? But I always try to check with myself, like if I don't let them do anything they don't want to, like if I'm not forcing you to do anything you don't want to, then I feel like it's influencing instead of manipulating. And if I, against my better knowledge of you as a person and what I know who you are and your values, try to influence that, then I know it's manipulation. Otherwise, I see it as influencing. But it's a fine line, and always trying to ask myself, am I still on the right side of that line, or isn't this going too far because I really want this project to succeed, for instance?
Thank you, Jiska. Eva, Susanna, and Carolina, how do you stay on the right side? So rather influencing than manipulating.
I think it's difficult to really put words onto that because depending on the person you have in front of you, I guess you may want to influence, but they'll see it as manipulation or you trying to get the better end of the deal. Yeah, I think it's as you said, Jiska, once you notice that there's, because you'll always have resistance, but once the resistance is maybe a bit too high, or you have the feeling that it gets a bit personal, I think that's maybe the line.
Mhm.
But obviously, I mean, in the corporate world, sometimes that line is crossed, even if you want it or not. So,
Like it or not,
yeah.
even manipulation has its place for change leaders. And if you've ever heard of Daniel Goleman and the 6 leadership style, he says that you can be coachative, informative, pace setting, but sometimes you have to be forceful and manipulating. And when I first saw it, I was like, what? This is not what I'm standing for. And I was won over when I actually got exposure to how he was saying that manipulation and forceful coercion is also a change leadership style when it comes to emergency, survival. And they give the example of 2 examples. One was when in the company's only survival is to reorganize. You don't necessarily manipulate, but you have to be forceful. There is no negotiation, no coaching, no pace setting in that. If we don't reorganize, if we don't focus on the customers, and if we don't streamline, we're not going to have an organization, a company next year. And there you can't be that softer, kinder kind of change leader. Using it all the time is very dangerous. I agree, but there is space for that to also apply. Another one is not in the corporate sector, but for example, they were talking about the planes and a plane going down because of turbulence, because of technical error. What do you think it would be like if a pilot and flight attendant was announcing the plane going down and needing to brace in a very light pace setting, affirmative, coachative style versus telling people these are the steps you need to do to survive? Now, that's also on a manipulation, forceful side, but that's the only way to help everyone survive. So what I would say is when it comes to manipulation, it's a signal that it's probably a negative feeling, a bit of a survival feeling, and likely it's a win to lose relationship. Someone wins, the other one loses. And with influencing, I think the transparency makes it influencing. And if we go for a win-win scenario. Now, theories apart, I'd like to show you the case study that I put together. And this is a case study that I wrote. It's going to last probably about 5 minutes altogether. I wrote it about a fictional company called TechCo, where Kelly, the Chief Innovation Officer, is launching a new initiative. She needs to make sure that she has people on board, but she will face a quite important kind of difficult behavior from Mark, the Chief Operating Officer, Alex, who is the Vice President of Finance, Emma, the HR Director, and Richard, the CEO, are going to be there as well. Now, this case study is still in formulation, so please bear with the imperfections. And I've asked 5 friends and my husband to audio record it, so you don't have to read it. So please just, I'm going to play it once. Please take notes. And when we come back, I'm going to split you up in 2 groups of 2. So you will have the chance to actually think about what would you do if you were the CEO. So let's listen to that.
I couldn't believe my ears. It was as if Mark hadn't heard a word I'd said during the meeting. I've been pushing for this innovation initiative for months, and now, at a critical juncture, he's resisting it like there's no tomorrow. I'm frustrated and concerned about the future of innovation at TechCo. I know my company, I know the people, and I know this will make a huge difference. The day started with high hopes. I had lined up a meeting with the senior leadership team to present my proposal for launching an innovation program to keep TechCo at the cutting edge of technology. As the Chief Innovation Officer, I believed it was my duty to drive this change. The proposal was well researched and I'd aligned my strategy with the company's growth objectives. But then, this is what happened.
I'll be honest, I was skeptical from the start. We have been operating the same way for years, and it's brought us success. I don't see why we need to disrupt everything just because of some newfangled ideas. Kelly can't seem to understand that what works in theory doesn't always translate to real-world operations. During the meeting, Kelly was full of enthusiasm, talking about how the innovation program would bring fresh perspectives and generate new revenue streams. But all I could think about was the potential chaos it could create. We have a solid operational model, and introducing these new ideas could cause disruptions we can't afford right now.
I was caught in the middle of this clash. On one hand, I could see the potential benefits of innovation, especially when it comes to financial growth. On the other, I had to consider the budget implications and the potential risk of investing in something that was not tested. As the meeting went on, the tension in the room escalated. Kelly's excitement was palpable, and she was determined to get her point across. Mark, on the other hand, was steadfast in his resistance, his skepticism evident not just in his body language, but in every word he spoke. I could feel the room dividing into two camps.
The clash between Kelly and Mark was uncomfortable, to say the least. As the HR director, my role was to maintain a positive work environment and foster collaboration. But it was challenging to see two senior leaders in such opposition. The meeting took a turn for the worse when Kelly and Mark started raising their voices. Their disagreements became personal. It was evident that the clash was about more than just an innovation initiative. Kelly accused Mark of being resistant to change and stifling progress. Mark retorted that Kelly was disconnected from the reality of day-to-day operations. As the meeting ended, the tension lingered in the room. It was clear that this clash had far-reaching implications for TechCo. The company was at a crossroads, and the decision on whether to embrace innovation or maintain status quo would shape its future.
I walked into that meeting hoping for a productive discussion, and what I got was a battlefield. The clash between Kelly and Mark exposed deep-seated differences in their perspectives. It's a tough situation. On one hand, innovation is crucial for our long-term success, and Kelly's ideas are promising. On the other hand, we can't disregard Mark's concerns about operational disruptions. As the CEO, I need to find a way to bridge this gap. It's not just about making a decision, it's about building alignment within the leadership team. I have to create a space for both Kelly and Mark to express their concerns and find common ground. I believe that with an open communication and collaboration, we can navigate through this turmoil and come out stronger as a company.
Okay, so that was a short scenario. And what I would like to do, I don't know if Susanna, I know you are working at the warehouse right now, if you are able to join the discussion, but whilst I wait for her to see if she can fully join. I have a question to you. It is, how could the CEO deal with the conflict of his senior leaders? So the innovation strategy that Kelly, the Chief Innovation Officer, is designing and is launching is super important. But the short case study describes a couple of issues that are coming up. And I'd like you to think about one reason, what would be the biggest issue? And then after that, to think about what could the CEO do. As I haven't heard back from Susanna, I'm just going to put you into a group separate from myself. And I'd like to give you 5 minutes so that you can actually talk between yourselves about this. Welcome back. Super fast, right? 5 minutes. Good. Just to introduce yourself a little bit and also talk. So as I haven't seen any input into the poll, let's just unmute ourselves and tell the group. So what do you think the CEO could do in such a situation?
We just like on the break of getting back here entered in the poll. We felt like the biggest issue that was that we're being not understanding each other or hearing each other, making each other feel heard. So I feel like that will be a good start. And Carolina brought that up, like making them both feel heard and understood, making each other see the point of views, and see how they both could be a valued contribution to the change. Kelly with her enthusiasm and drive, and Mark with incorporating the risk analysis and adding the operational point of view.
Very good. So it's definitely creating a platform for the two of them to actually voice out where they are coming from, because without that, they will not be speaking on the same language. Thank you, and Carolina. How about you, Susanna and Eva, from your discussion? What do you think would be a useful intervention from the CEO?
Well, I was telling Eva, probably what needs to happen is an alignment on the objective and the end goal. They probably both mean well, and they just have different perspectives. And there needs to be alignment on what are we trying to achieve as a leadership team, as a company, and then figure out how the change can happen. And Eva was suggesting, could it be a step-by-step approach? Could it be something more quick? And that will probably depend on how vital this change is, what the objective is, what is the timeline? Is it something that is just, we want to innovate because that's the type of company we want to be, or is this impacting our business? And if we don't innovate, there will be a negative consequence, and we need to act fast. And all those are things that will really drive what and how needs to happen. And going back to our previous discussion, where the CEO can be influencing or maybe slightly more forceful and manipulative, depending on what needs to happen.
Exactly. So sometimes the CEO does need to set the direction, forceful or not, that's up to the actual situation. But I liked both of you were mentioning, it was about understanding both perspectives, but also when it comes to any strategy, the question is who's going to sponsor or really back it. In this case, for example, the C-suite, so all the people at the same level with Mark and Kelly from whom we've heard, the question is whether there is a unified front behind this innovation strategy. If it's just presented at one of the meetings, which often is the case in organizations, there will be likely resistance. But if you do the right stakeholder engagement, the meetings to find out what people individually, influencers, think of your initiative, of your change, there will be a higher likelihood of it receiving the positive insights and the support moving forward. Now, we talked about this a little bit at the very end, at the very beginning. There is no difficult people, not difficult stakeholders, sorry. But we need to, first of all, seek first to understand where the other people are coming from. This is the perspective Yiska and Carolina was highlighting. And only once we know why Mark was resisting it with all his forces, that's when we should be talking about what is the rationale behind the why, a how, a what. So we are understood. Stephen Covey, probably many of you have heard about him or read even his book, amongst others, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's one of the habits that he is suggesting when it comes to coping with stakeholder resistance. There is a very, very knowledgeable Harvard professor called Rosbeth Moss-Kanter. In one of the HBR articles, she talks about the 10 universal reasons for people to resist change. The little drawing, I think, is very, very expressive. Who wants to change? Everyone is putting it up. We all need an innovation strategy, like in the case study of TechCo. But who wants to change? Suddenly people disappear. And what this lady put her research towards is to understand what are the universal reasons. And most of the reasons are basically can be covered around this, because people are feeling that they're losing control, that there's just too much uncertainty around them, that yet again there is a surprise, that everything seems so different, I don't even recognize my organization, that I'm going to lose face, that I have concerns and I'm not sure about the competence that I have, that the change that you, Eva, is bringing up is just more work again to me. Or when Carolina allows us a change, is like, yeah, but I think, Carolina, there will be ripple effects. This is just the first of many, right? There's a doubtful in that. Or Yiska, they say, I heard that before. We've tried it 4 times. It's not going to work. Or sometimes the threat is real. So people are afraid, they resist because indeed there is a lion in the room, a tiger in the room that threatens their survival in the organization. The article itself, I put the link here, is very insightful. She was really looking at how we can best understand people and why they resist. When I read it, I read this beautiful description, like, that sounds all good. It kind of groups all these, like, fear of the unknown, fear of the failure, etc., in a bit more specific criteria. But what can we do about it? And in my career as a change professional, I've found one that I felt can be a good toolbox to reach out to. Again, this is going back to ProSci. I put the link here in case you would like to download the PDF itself. But the 10 tactics that they are talking about that generally could help us cope with resistance is listen and understand objections. You talked about that. Yiska, Carolina, you mentioned that. Focus on the what and let go of the how. Susanna and Eva, you talked about that. Here, what I like about this is let's not go into details, but talk about the what and also basically the why and when. And the third one is remove barriers. So if Mark says business as usual would be threatened by launching this innovation strategy, what it is, then we need to see how we can really remove the barrier, basically acknowledging and responding to his concern. The fourth one is provide simple, clear choices and consequences. Now, the best thing is for us to say yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. So people can actually decide for simple actions if they want to try it or not. This is sometimes what we call quick wins. We allow people to test the ground to see that they don't have to resist it. Gradually, we're going to get there. The fifth one is creating hope. Creating hope is talking about benchmarks where it has worked, the change before, case studies, maybe from the competitors, either of failure or success, so it inspires them to do more. Then show the benefits. This is really important. Why? Make a personal appeal, either invite a formal or an informal leader to invite people to be part of it. So for example, you can ask the general manager, or you can ask even the janitor. I'm exaggerating here, but if the janitor is really liked and sought after, you catch him being approached or her being approached in the corridor at the breaks, you know he or she is a ringleader, an opinion leader. So involve that person to create a personal appeal for people. Once the right people are in it, it's going to attract more people. Convert the strongest dissenters. I agree, and I strongly disagree also with this tactic. Convert them, really change them to be supporters if they are influencers. If nobody listens to them, then deprioritize. Demonstrate consequences. A lot of organizations suffer from this and struggle with this. Is basically showing what if we don't do it, what will happen, and provide incentives, which isn't just money, but also acknowledgement, being mentioned in newsletters. These top 10 tactics by far don't mean that it's all that you can do. But Yiska, Eva, Carolina, and Susanna, if right now you have resistance with any of your stakeholders, try to see what holds them back and then use some of these tactics and see if it links with reality. Again, you can download it from the link. I will share the presentation after the session. And there is one short video I'd like to share with you. A very good go-to website is called Mind Tools. This video is just 3 minutes, but it explains a structured stakeholder approach. I will show it to you and I will conclude it before the hour, respecting your time. So let's watch this short video.
Projects and implementing ideas, your actions can affect a lot of people, and some of them will have more influence than others. Knowing who these influential people are before you start a project or initiative is incredibly important. This is because you're more likely to succeed if you have their support. But how can you identify these key people? This is where conducting a stakeholder analysis is useful. There are 3 steps to doing this. First, you brainstorm a list of people who might have an interest in your project. They could include your boss, senior executives, colleagues, clients, shareholders, or even trade associations or people in the community. You might have a long list once you're done, and that's fine. Some of these people will have a big influence of what you're doing, while others will have none at all. In step 2, you're going to plot all of these people on a power interest grid to get a visual representation of their influence. As you can see, it's divided into 4 quadrants. The actions you take will depend on where they are on the grid. Plot people vertically based on how powerful they are, and horizontally based on how much interest they have on your project. For example, imagine you've identified 4 people who have a stake in your project. These are your boss, Diego, your colleagues, Sarah and Addie, and a senior executive, John. Diego and John both have a great deal of power and interest in your project, so you need to place them in the upper right-hand quadrant. You'll want to work closely with both of them during implementation. Sarah and Addie, on the other hand, have a great deal of interest in your project, but little power. They'll both go in the lower right quadrant. You won't work closely with them, but you want to keep them informed of your progress. Once you've plotted all your stakeholders on the grid, you'll need to find out what motivates them. For instance, what financial or emotional interests do they have in your project? Who influences their opinions? You'll likely find that some of your stakeholders will be avid supporters of what you're doing, while others might try to block your efforts. You can refine the grid by color coding each person's name, depending on whether you think they'll be a supporter or a critic. In our example, Diego, Addie, and Sarah support your project, while John opposes it. So you'll need to do some work to win him round.
This is just a snippet of the website I mentioned to you. I made this slide to summarize it. So at the beginning, Susanna, you mentioned already external, internals. Some of you mentioned who are the stakeholders, people who are impacted or can impact, influence, or are influenced by the change. You create a map. Maybe it's just a brainstormed list of people who have power over the project or have interests in it. Now, this graph, power and interest that this gentleman is talking about, in many companies I have worked in, this is one of the winner formula because it allows us to prioritize who to focus on when it comes to stakeholder analysis and influencing strategy. And if people have high power and high interest in the project, that's where you need to manage them closely. If they have a lot of power, maybe senior, maybe they have invisible influencing power, but they are not interested, keep them satisfied, keep them on your side. And once you know who are your priorities, that's where you need to use a stakeholder analysis template. Without going too much of a detail, this is one version of the many templates out there that is encouraging us to look at the stakeholder or homogeneous group, look at whether the impact of or on the change is high, medium, or low. How do they feel about the change today and where they need to be? Is it resisting, fence-sitting, supporting, or committed? Where we need them to be, so how we need them to behave in the future, what concerns and interests they have, and what is our influencing strategy. In today's workshop, it was not meant to do a demo for this, but in case you have used this before or something similar, basically just following these templates or whichever version you have allows you to bring something intangible, which is resistance, into something tangible, because once you identify the influencing strategy, it will allow you to go deeper into how I can bring them on board. This is what I planned for today. And my question to you is, what is your biggest takeaway from today? We talked about, I'm just going to summarize it. We talked about who are stakeholders and what is the emotional journey they go through from denial to resistance to exploring and acceptance. We looked at ADKAR, ADKAR, which is one of many change methodologies. If you are not yet fully certified trained, it is simple, might be very useful. And on the website mentioned, you will be able to withdraw some resources that can help you. And we looked at one case study to see how we would tackle it, and the 3 steps model, which I believe does help to bring intangible benefits to effectively influencing stakeholders. Now, as I know I'm waiting for responses, I want to respect the time as well that I have available. I just wanted to thank you again for supporting my campaign. This workshop is not intended for the wide public, only for those people who supported my Change Matters book campaign. I hope it was valuable for you. And a little quote to close today with, it's from Maya Angelou. Maybe you have come across that before. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And when it comes to stakeholder influencing, when it comes to change management, this is exactly about that. How you make people feel and made them feel in the past will influence our ability to influence them. So bring a bit of tangible side to this intangible beauty of influencing others. And I wish you all the best with your stakeholder management. And thank you so much for joining today. I look forward to talking to you soon again. Thank you.